Scorpion is the face of Mortal Kombat. He's been playable in almost every game, and yet he's never the main character. Yup, it's always someone else. The developers would rather invent a new main character than allow Scorpion to have the spotlight. I have no clue why they treat him like this, but after watching an amazing video by Gledit, I thought, yeah, let's do that for Scorpion. Because honestly, it's hilarious to watch Scorpion ping-pong in these games. Sometimes he does a lot, other times he's just there, and sometimes he dies. In more than one game, actually. Because it's Mortal Kombat after all, where characters can actually die instead of just faking it, or the developers lying to you. Alright, here we go, starting off with the very first Mortal Kombat game, where Scorpion kills Sub-Zero. And that's about it. Might not seem like much, but keep in mind nobody else gets a kill in this game. In other words, nobody else dies. In the film adaptation, Shang Tsung dies, but not in the actual game. So while killing one character might not seem like much, it sets a lot in motion for the next Mortal Kombat games to come, which is why the first Scorpion is going in big impact tier. However, as a big Sub-Zero fan myself, I feel inclined to inform you all that Sub-Zero beat Scorpion twice before this happened. That's right, in mythologies, Scorpion dies to Sub-Zero, then tries to fight him again as an undead specter and loses a second time to Bi-Han, otherwise known as the original Sub-Zero. So while Scorpion does get revenge in the first Mortal Kombat game, Sub-Zero still has twice as many victories against him, and I just wanted to point that out. For a fun fact though, originally the first tier was called Main Character, but then I realized that never happens for Scorpion, so I renamed it. Alright, next up is Mortal Kombat 2. What's this guy gonna do next? He kills a main character in the very first game. I can't wait to see what happens in Mortal Kombat 2. Except almost nothing happens. Yeah, I'm not joking. It's actually hilarious how little Scorpion does in this game. At least when you consider the first game and how important Scorpion is in the fandom overall. He does almost nothing in this game. Basically, he learns Sub-Zero is in the second tournament and he thinks, no way, not on my watch. I gotta kill this guy again because someone keeps resurrecting people. I came back from the dead, maybe Sub-Zero did too. However, he soon learns it's not the same Sub-Zero, it's his younger brother, and this new Sub-Zero is actually really chill. He never kills anybody and is actually a good guy, so Scorpion says, I'm not gonna kill him. In fact, I'm gonna watch over this new Sub-Zero in the next tournament and make sure he doesn't die. And yeah, that's it for Mortal Kombat 2 Scorpion. Not very much happens, he's just there. Then we have Mortal Kombat 3, where Scorpion is straight up missing. Yeah, he's not in this game due to legal issues. You can learn more about that online if you want to, it's just one Google away. I personally don't want to get into it for this video, but yeah, Scorpion is missing from Mortal Kombat 3, straight up. Though thankfully, he's the only Scorpion in this tier. Next up is Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3, where Scorpion does do something if you count the arcade ending, however, it's not canon, as in Scorpion's ending doesn't actually happen. And as to why Scorpion's in the game at all, apparently Shao Kahn resurrected him from hell to fight on his behalf, but then nothing really happens. Alright, Mortal Kombat 4. Depending on who you ask, this could be a big impact or not a big deal at all, but for me personally, it's a big deal. Because in this game, Scorpion learns that Sub-Zero never killed his clan at all. Nope, turns out that was Quan Chi, disguised as Sub-Zero. Or rather, he was disguised as Bi-Han, to be more specific, which means that Scorpion got revenge on the wrong dude. After learning this, he drags Quan Chi to the Netherrealm and then chases the dude for almost a decade, and I'm not joking, because Scorpion can't die in the Netherrealm, so even if Quan Chi does defeat him, the chase never ends. Scorpion keeps going after him, which is honestly really hilarious when you think about it, and a massive W for Scorpion. That's not the case for the next game, because in Deadly Alliance, Scorpion does almost nothing and then dies. Yeah, to two brand new characters, Draman and Moloch, who some people might consider jobbers. Yeah, Scorpion shows up, gets beaten by two jobbers, tossed into a Solnado, and dies. Yeah, it was a tough time to be a Scorpion fan. But thankfully, next up is Deception, possibly the most important game for Scorpion in terms of what a big deal he is in this game. Or at least, depending on who you ask, it's heavily implied that Monster is actually Scorpion. He becomes champion of the Elder Gods in his own ending and then is sent out to stop Shujinko from collecting all the Kamidogu because Onaga is actually manipulating him behind the scenes, which is why the Elder Gods sent Scorpion to fight him and defeat him. Now if you're wondering why he looks like this instead of regular Scorpion, who is in the game, I've got no honest answer for you. But Monster fights just like Scorpion with his exact moves and is also sent by the Elder Gods, so it's very likely Scorpion. Or in other words, words, Scorpion is the champion of the Elder Gods in this game and sent to save the universe from Onaga on their behalf. That's a pretty big deal and definitely going in the big impact tier. Now unfortunately Scorpion loses, which sucks, but keep in mind Shujinko is pretty much unstoppable in this game. So next up, let's talk about Shaolin Monks. In this game, Scorpion is actually a side mission. You can go the entire game without ever fighting him. However, if you do complete the Scorpion side missions, you get to kill the guy. He straight up dies by falling into lava Terminator style, which is amazing. Or in other words, if you've been keeping track, that's 3 games so far that Scorpion dies in. He's on a roll. Next up is Armageddon, and here is where things get pretty depressing. Scorpion is back to being a villain in this game. In fact, you could argue this is the most evil version of Scorpion in the entire series, because the Elder Gods, for some reason, resurrected his dead clan as zombies, so they're just wandering around like husks, which understandably sends Scorpion into a blind rage. I mean, how would you feel if all your family, friends, and loved ones were just zombies wandering around? Scorpion actively tries to stop Taven, which, keep in mind, would end the universe, right? The Elder Gods would die too, though, which is what Scorpion wants, and that's why he's trying to stop Taven. Yeah, that's pretty dark, Scorpion, I'm not gonna lie. Do I feel bad for you? Yes, I definitely do, but still, man, that is dark, and definitely the most evil version of Scorpion. However, with all that said, he doesn't do much of anything. He shows up, gets defeated, and that's it. Which is why, despite the edgy backstory and evil persona, Scorpion's going in the just there tier. Next up is Mortal Kombat vs. DC, and Scorpion actually does a lot in this game. It's tiny stuff, but he does quite a lot. For example, he kidnaps Katana, gets in a fight with Batman, gets possessed by Dark Khan in his ending, and is set up to be a villain in the sequel, if that ever happened, but it doesn't. However, even so, I would argue that Scorpion is pretty active in this game. He's doing stuff. Alright, it's time for the reboot, where Scorpion does pretty much everything from the past trilogy of games, and nothing new, really. However, you do empathize more with him in this game because you're actually taking control of him and playing him and experiencing his struggle. In fact, I would argue that Scorpion's chapter is one of the most engaging and enjoyable in the whole game, but sadly that has no impact on this tier list. Overall, Scorpion has an impact, but it's not a huge one. He's just active. And you know what? Since Injustice Scorpion is on this tier list, I'll just put him right here in the does nothing tier, because yeah, he shows up in the game and is playable, but technically he's not there and doesn't impact the story at all. Which means next up is Mortal Kombat X, and this part is gonna be tricky because if I include the comics, then Scorpion actually does quite a lot. He reforms the Shirai Ryu, and he also raises Takeda, arguably the most beloved of the Kombat kids, so that's also a big deal. However, all of this happens outside of the game, so I guess to be fair, we can only use the story from MKX itself. Scorpion forms a truce with Sub-Zero, although that's mostly Kuai Liang's doing. Then after learning what happened to his people and how he was tricked, Scorpion sets out to kill Quan Chi. And if he succeeded, that would have actually saved the day for everybody, and you could argue Scorpion's the main character, but sadly he's not fast enough, and one could argue that Scorpion is the reason Shinnok gets resummoned in the first place, so he's actually kind of the villain, although he does still get the kill on Quan Chi, so that's pretty cool. I would argue that Scorpion is very active in Mortal Kombat X, along with summoning Shinnok by mistake could be considered a big deal. He had a big impact on the story. If not for Scorpion's dumb intervention, Shinnok wouldn't have come back and given us that cool final chapter, so yeah, Scorpion had a big impact. Next up is Mortal Kombat 11 with 2 Scorpions. That's right, double the Scorpion, double the fun for this game. However, one of those Scorpions dies, and it's my favorite Scorpion because it's the older one with all the character development from past games, but he just dies, and we're left with old timeline Scorpion, who might be objectively cooler, but he's not my favorite because he hasn't been through all the games. Even so, both Scorpions do accomplish quite a lot in this game. The older Scorpion stops the Cyber Initiative and destroys the Cyber Lin Kuei facility with Sub-Zero's help, and then the OG Scorpion defeats Devora, avenges his own death, ironically enough, helps out the other Earthrealm defenders, and also fights on Chiron's ship to destroy more Cyber Lin Kuei from Frost, and then later on he fights demons and stuff who are also working under Chronica. So lots of fighting done by the old timeline Scorpion, and the older Scorpion played a bigger role in the story overall. So when you combine both Scorpions together, I would argue it's a pretty big impact on the story overall. And real quick, I want to apologize to any Onslaught fans, but I never played the game. It's mobile exclusive and it's been discontinued, so I guess I'll never get the chance to play it. The Fort Snake played it and he told me what Scorpion does, but I'm gonna skip it because I have no personal experience with this game and I don't think many of you watching do either. However, for anyone who might be curious, here's a quick summary on screen. If you want to give it a read, just pause the video. Because last and possibly least, we have Mortal Kombat 1. I personally like like this game, but the issue is it's not really Scorpion. Instead of playing Hanzo, we have Kuai Liang as Scorpion, who many would argue is not Scorpion because Scorpion is Hanzo in every other game. So as a result, I could just end the video here and say Mortal Kombat 1 is not Scorpion because Hanzo hasn't done anything yet. He is there though, as a child, and for the sake of this video, I guess I'll just go with the game's version of Scorpion, the guy named Scorpion in the game. Kuai Liang pretends to assault Madame Bo's tea house, then he goes to free Kenshi at Johnny Cage's mansion, later goes on a mission with his older brother Bi-Han and learns that Bi-Han is kind of a traitor, so he kicks his butt, then goes back to Liu Kang, and ends up leaving the Lin Kuei to start his own ninja clan named the Shirai Ryu, along with Smoke and some other ninjas who don't have names. Then in the Chaos Reigns expansion story, he gets married to Harumi and she doesn't actually die, so that's kinda cool and noteworthy. But Sub-Zero gets stuck in the wrong multiverse timeline, so Scorpion goes to rescue him, does battle with Noob Saibot, and that's kind of it. So overall, you could argue that MK1 Scorpion does a lot of stuff, but it doesn't have a big impact on the story overall. Regardless, we're done with the tier list. Here it is on screen. For anyone who skipped ahead, I hate you, you're a bad person. I'm just kidding. About hating you, I do still think you're dumb for skipping until the end. You're getting roasted right now because you skipped until the end, but for everyone else who watched the entire video, thank you so much and I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please leave a like down below, it helps the channel out a ton, and then finish that combo by subscribing and ringing that bell so you never miss any future videos. And also, I've got a comic book, but there's less than 30 days left to order, so if you want to get a copy, make sure to do it now. There's exclusive covers on the Indiegogo that will never be available ever again. So once again, you want to act fast. Click that link down below and get yourself a comic for only $10. It's over 25 pages of non-stop action and concept art, all that incredible stuff. You're gonna love it. Get yourself a comic book today. Click that Indiegogo link down below and learn even more about the story, its plot, the characters, all that incredible stuff. One last time, thanks to everyone for watching the video. Get yourself a comic book, come back next time, and as always, stay underdog.